This is FightFans Radio.
Hello everybody, it's another edition of Untethered MMA on FightFans Radio. It is January 3rd, 2012. It is our first show in 2013. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Almost did that thing. Our first show in the new year. If you want to reach the show, you can call us at 410-988-6525. And of course, you can always reach us on Twitter. You can reach me at It's Mike Fagan. You can reach Derek at FightLinkerSubo. And if you want to reach Matt Roth, who's not on the show today, you can still reach him at Matt Roth 512. If you don't know, Matt has left Bleacher Report, so he's taking a week off, kind of get himself together, and hopefully we'll see him next week. I was just thinking as we were going through the intro, Derek, this would be the perfect week for a sort of year-end in review show in terms of our favorite fights of the year and favorite card and fighter of the year and all that. But I think we'll wait till next week, especially since there's no MMA of note this coming weekend, and I think we can get a week of preparation for it, and then we'll hopefully have Matt back next week for that. But how are you doing this week, buddy?
Well, I was unaware that we were supposed to do prep for this show. I
do prep every week. Every week, Derek.
You're nuts, bro, because I've just been winging it for like the last year. This better not be a repeat of 2012, so don't fucking say that again. It's a new year. I don't know how many viewers we added or listeners we added in the last year. I don't even know how many we kept because I think we started with like 12, and I don't know if we're there right now. But thanks for sticking with us. Roth will be back next week, inshallah. I haven't talked to him about when he's coming back yet, but I assume it'll be soon. You know,
I like that you're guaranteeing his appearance next week, but you haven't talked to him about it. And
it said inshallah, which means God willing. That's all I can say about it. I have no idea if he will or not, but hopefully, and then because right now, and I was going to bring this up if he was here, now we're truly untethered. No corporate overlords, no advertisers to speak of, really.
Well, we've got the FightFans Radio overlords.
Oh yeah, my one corporate overlord
us.
is the black lady that I got stoned at UFC 150. So that's okay with me. And when you come to us, you're not going to get any kind of agenda. We're not trying to generate page views, or God knows we're not trying to generate listeners. We say what we think, and we invite you to say the same. So,
wow, that was almost poetic.
Almost.
So how was your New Year's before we get into MMA talk? How was your New Year's this year?
I didn't do anything. They had the DUI patrols out and everything, and they were offering the free taxi rides, but you'll be waiting at the bar for an hour and a half, 2 hours if you try to do that. There's no way to get it. This town has no taxis. So I just stayed in and had a couple and, watched some old fights recently. And I don't know, did you catch today what Sherdog named as the fight of the year last year?
I did not actually.
Would you care to take a stab? Keeping in mind that Hua versus Henderson is not eligible.
I saw that Chris Nelson was giving a shout out.
Chris Nelson is maybe the pound-for-pound best follow for MMA on Twitter at 3am MMA. Just a great Twitter account.
It's true. You want to give me a hint? Because I'm really drawing a blank here.
It was one of the weight classes that nobody gives a shit about. So that narrows it down to about 3.
I don't know.
It's Jug versus Dustin Poirier.
Okay.
Fantastic fight. And with this, the only argument that I see in favor of oversaturation that kind of backs that up is that you tend to forget now. When there were 3 or 4 cards a year, you could remember almost every fight that happened in the UFC just off the top of your head. What happened, how it went. Now, with a card every couple of weeks and, 10 fights, and if you're a hardcore fan, you try to watch them all, you're seeing a couple hundred fights a year. And it's tough to remember the 1 or 2 that are lovely, and that fight was almost 8 months ago. You never hear about it anymore, mostly because Chan Sung Jung has pretty much been on the fucking shelf since then for some stupid reason. But great fight.
Yeah, I don't remember if we were talking about this on the show last week, or if this is something that just I was talking with someone in my personal life, but it has gotten to a point where I used to be able to tell you, what fight was coming up on what card, what fight took place on what card 8 months ago. If you told me if you told me a fight, I could tell you generally, if not the exact card, close to it. And now, like you were saying, I can hardly remember which fights happened, 8 months ago, like you said. And to kind of, you were saying that this card or this fight took place 8 months ago. The only fight that
I think
really,
I'm pulling that out of my ass.
It's
no idea.
It's something like that. The only fight that really is like, in terms of fight of the year stuff, that kept my attention throughout the whole year was the Edgar Maynard rematch on New Year's a couple years ago when I had that winning fight of the year that year. But I mean, that had the added benefit of happening that very first day of the new year, and having that significance carried on by the end of the year.
And the significance means a lot because you may have a given year where a lot of the significant fighters are hurt or one of them retires, and then the fights that they are involved in are either lopsided or just not that exciting to watch. You have to go a little bit below to kind of that contenders rung in order to find the really good stuff. Those guys fight with a little more abandon. They're closer in terms of talent and ability versus somebody who's going up to challenge the champ that really has no business in being there. So, those kind of fights like Jung versus Poirier, where both guys were just really hungry and trying to go. That fight was May of last year, so I nailed it exactly for the 8 months. But what the fuck has he been doing since then, and why have we not seen the Korean Zombie since that fight? Because I don't think he's had an 8-month injury without having anything scheduled in the interim.
I couldn't tell you. I got a question for you, though. Speaking of fight of the year, and this is kind of something to consider going into the next week, if we talk about it then. You were talking about having to go that extra rung below, kind of looking at the contender fights. How much weight do you place on a fight that takes place, in a main event on a big show? Because I've always been of the opinion that I give those fights a little extra weight. So, if maybe a Jung Poirier fight is maybe a little more exciting than another fight, but that fight was in the main event of a big show, I might put the other fight ahead. And the example I like to give is back in 2008 when Quentin Jackson and Forrest Griffin fought. I had that as my fight of the year for 2008. I think that was the same year Alvarez had a couple great fights in the Dream Tournament, and I think there were a couple other really good contenders that year. But obviously Jackson Griffin was a great fight, and then you throw in the fact that it was a big money main event for the light heavyweight title, and that kind of pushed it over the edge for me.
Well, and you also have to add it to the fact that it was an upset, and that's going to add a certain amount
with controversy. With
people bitching about the decision as well. But the fact is that the amount of jaw droppage that you get at the end of a fight, or even during a fight, if there's a moment like that, and I think there were a few of those in the Poirier versus Korean Zombie fight. But when people heard Griffin's name being won, and as they watched that fight, I think that feeling of surprise really weighs into any kind of, if there was a big upset, like, I mean, if Chael Sonnen had won against Anderson Silva, that would be fight of the decade, simply because of the unexpected nature of it, and everybody would have it, in their upper echelon of greatest moments in MMA history when the champion finally fell, just because of the shock and the difference on the betting line. So I think that plays into it as well when you remember Jackson versus Griffin, and that's probably why it won that year.
I actually went back, I used to do the Bloody Elbow Reader Awards, where I would have readers send in...
Those idiots.
Bloody
Elbow readers.
they would get 3 votes for first, second, and third. It was weighted. The fight that won that year was Miguel Torres and Yoshiro Maeda from WC 34. Griffin Jackson was second, and then Eddie Alvarez, Joaquim Hansen was.
And I think Maeda benefited a little bit from that too, because that was when Carlos Condit was a murderer, and like those fights weren't even supposed to be particularly competitive, and he acquitted himself well.
Well, and I think also what happened too was
he was the judo guy.
Was this?
I need to remember my WEC. I have pretty much every UFC from UFC 20 up on my hard drive now, but finding WEC tournaments is a pain in the ass.
I don't know why you're bringing. Wait. Yeah, Maeda was fighting at bantamweight against Miguel Torres. I don't know where you're.
Okay, that's what I'm fucking up. The champion that he fought, yes, Miguel Torres, and that was that before or after the? That was before the Mitsugaki fight, wasn't it?
I believe so. Just off of memory.
So Torres, was like I think 35-1 going into the Maeda fight or something like that. Just a ridiculous record, and that was really when he started showing, being human and not being like the unbeatable guy he was before.
Yeah, and I think what also happened too with Alvarez, I think his vote got split probably with the Kawajiri fight, because he had those 2 fights back to back with Hansen and Kawajiri that were both insanely good, and I think if he had just had one fight.
Right. Okay. Quick aside, who's your NFL MVP? Thank you for not immediately having a candidate, because I don't have one either. You know who my vote's going for, but God damn it, they both made it really, really hard, didn't they?
Yeah.
JJ Watt. Got it.
I probably go. I'd really want to take another look at their stats sort of in depth, but I really like Manning. I think. I think they're both obviously very important to their teams, and I think if you take them both out and put an average or replacement level guy there, neither team is making the playoffs for sure. But I always put more importance on the quarterback position. I think Manning is. And I also think,
fucking Peterson came back from a horrific injury in December, and the fact that he did what he did is absolutely incredible. But Manning missed a year, was gone, did not play last season, and came back this season and did this.
Yeah, and I think there's also. I think it's one of those debates. It's not like Miguel Cabrera, Mike Trout, right?
I knew you were going to say that. I fucking knew you were going to say that. It's not automatic like Mike Trout for MVP.
Well, and that should have been. I mean, that wasn't a really close debate. It
wasn't a really close vote either. Miguel kicked his ass.
Oh, which is unfortunate. But I'm assuming you would take Manning as well.
Yeah, and I'd put Larry Walker in the Hall of Fame, too.
Yeah, I mean, Larry Walker's one of those borderline guys, depending on how exclusive you think the Hall should be. I think
that season, his MVP year was absolutely magical. And if he would have just stayed healthy, I think he'd be in the 500 homer, 3,000 hit club.
Yeah, you can say that about a lot of guys, though.
I can, but some of them are in the Hall.
If they had just stayed healthy. But let's get into the show on Saturday. Of course, what actually might be the biggest news of the weekend, despite a very good and very convincing win for Cain Velasquez, is the disappearance of Mike Goldberg. Came out Friday at the weigh-ins, sort of caught everyone off guard. Was initially reported that Goldberg was sick, but it was later clarified by Dana White that he was, quote, taking some time off. I immediately heard rumors from a couple people that IM me that there was some sort of drug or rehab involved. I think it was Therese Owen who is of the first official report about it, and actually got more specific, said it was probably Adderall. But yeah, so John Anik stepped in. I thought John Anik did a considering the circumstances on 24 hours notice, did a very good job.
Sure, but I don't think that booth works long term.
Well, did you listen to Anik on? And I know you don't care for this guy, but did you listen on Josh Gross's Gross Point Blank this week
I do not listen to that podcast, but I have heard good things about it, and I dislike Gross less now than I did before because he's really dropped the whole Coke promotion thing, as most people have in the last couple of years.
He had Anik on. It was actually a really interesting podcast. He had Anik on for about 20 or 30 minutes, and it was a really nice interview, and it sort of broke down, kind of the play-by-play role in the UFC. Anik made a really good point that MMA is in a really different spot than a lot of sports because the color role is almost by nature a sort of hybrid play-by-play role. A guy like Rogan has a little more knowledge about, say, the ground game, is going to have a little easier time. So he was talking about how and he also said straight the UFC fan probably wants to hear Rogan talk when Anik talk. And so there's sort of that kind of built-in, I don't want to say pressure, but, obligation to sort of cede to Joe when you can, which is why, and I think one of the biggest complaints was that, if anything, Anik didn't talk enough. But it sounds like that was a conscious decision, especially considering, again, short notice, had never worked with Joe before, had a personal relationship with him, but never a professional relationship. So, what were your thoughts when that all came down and rating of Anik's performance on Saturday?
It's not that I think he did a bad job. He's a fine commentator. He doesn't make stupid cocktail napkin jokes. He doesn't do crazy voice inflections. He's not silly. He's on top of the action. He has good background on the guys. He obviously does his homework. But when it's Joe and it's Mike, I would say that the ratio of them talking is probably 60-40 Rogan. But when Goldberg wants to come in, he gets in. And Joe responds to it, and they're interactive, and then they get back to the fight. There was a point, especially immediately preceding and immediately proceeding the Velasquez knockdown of Dos Santos in the first round, that it's just Joe talking for like 30 seconds, and then you can tell that he pauses, and it's almost like you can see him poking John in the ribs saying, fucking say something. Like, it's not good. And with Goldberg, you have a strong voice. That knockdown would have been an instant, big right hand by Velasquez. And Joe says it because he knows that somebody has to, and John's not going to do it. So as much weird, shitty schadenfreude glee as there was out there thinking that Goldberg might have been fired, and you're guilty of that a little bit, Fagan. Said you're going to reboot the website, started posting old shit. I saw what you did. With all that, I think that Saturday night showed his utility in the booth. That as far as you're going to have a pitch man, so you got to read something in the first 5 or 10 seconds. He does that better than anybody. You want somebody that he does background, he does homework. Everybody focuses on his little moments, but for the other, 90% of the time, he's basically doing what Anik does, just a little less sophisticated. But in terms of voice control and modulation and getting in there, choosing your spots with anecdotes and things to bring up and questions to ask Joe so he's not just doing a fucking monologue. I think that Mike, that's last Saturday night showed that, we're going to be happy when Mike gets back.
I think you're a crazy man.
You agree with everything I just said except for the we're going to be happy when Mike gets back part.
Well, no, I mean, I thought, I thought there were.
And I'm not saying Anik did a bad job or that he's a bad commentator. I like him with Florian because Florian tries to be Goldberg, only he's worse at it. Like every time you hit somebody, I heard him with that one. He hurt him.
Well, it's interesting. I think one of the things, even with Florian, I think John could talk more. I think that's probably my biggest criticism of him in the UFC. But, if you go back and listen to the stuff he did for Bellator, when Bellator was on Deportes and they had the English language version, John was a lot more, obviously, in the solo booth, had to talk a lot more, and was also way more, way better at sort of kind of expressing the emotional state of a fight. Mm-hmm. When that was the year that there was the Toby Yamada kind of inverse triangle.
Inverted triangle, yeah, against what was his name? Fabiano, right?
Yeah, and I think so. But he had a great call for that. He expressed the kind of surprise of the moment really well. And I think in a two-man booth, it's a little harder for him to do that. and I don't know if that's his own personal, I don't want to step on toes of my color guy, or if it's sort of a situation where the UFC sort of wants him to cede control.
Well, a lot of it is that that chemistry that you get just by doing it with somebody over and over. Like, I can know when I can just mercilessly interrupt you, and it's fine. And we've honed that over hours and hours of me doing it to you, and you occasionally getting pissed. But you haven't done that in a while because I picked the spots.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point for Anik on Saturday, though. I think if you give him 6 months with Rogan, maybe he finds that sweet spot.
Oh, no, they'll watch the tape because, if it is, in fact, rehab, then I think that the over-under on that's probably about 90 days. And then, we'll see. Best of luck to Mike, whatever it is that he's going through, because obviously it's not a fucking vacation or anything like that. So, I wasn't hoping that you got fired, Mr. Goldberg. I just hope you know that. I was not one of those guys that was fucking playing a trumpet. Mike.
Well,
you were dancing in your chair.
I'm still sort of dancing in my chair about it. I think it's interesting how the UFC handled it. Obviously they've never been one to release information they don't want to, so it's not necessarily surprising. If I'm remembering correctly, and there was a little bit of the prelims that I sort of missed, and then a little bit of the pay-per-view I missed because of cable issues, but I don't remember them really, Anik or Rogan, mentioning Goldberg at all in terms of.
Be weird? I think it would be weird if the UFC did, okay? Because A, they're a privately held company, so they don't have to. That's number one. Number two, if you say, hey, where's your employee? If you're a company and your employee isn't at work and somebody, you're an entertainment company and they say, hey, where's your guy? And he's going to rehab because of a pill addiction. You're not going to say that or disclose that, A, because it's partially illegal depending on his medical condition, and B, because you're not a douchebag. So you're going to say, he's taking some time off, we don't know when he'll be back, and you're going to leave it at that, and then let the TMZs and everyone fucking hound it out. But you're not going to disclose anything. Well, if it was the NFL, they'd do the same thing. If it came out that one of their commentators had alcoholism and was taking the season off, the NFL would just release a statement saying, we love him, best of luck with whatever he's going through, we look forward to seeing him back. They wouldn't say good luck with your alcoholism.
No, and I wasn't expecting that at all. I was expecting even just a, hi, this is John Anik, Mike Goldberg is taking time off, we wish him the best, or just some sort of little comment about that, and there was no mention of it at all. I mean, it is jarring for. I remember when
it's going to be short term. Like if they originally said that he was sick, they might have been like, look, just take the week off. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Get your shit together. And then he came back to him and was like, I'm going to need more in a couple of weeks. And then they said that at the press conference. But who knows? We don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Because I definitely think you can come into work like fucked up once, and they're just like, dude, take the week off, then we'll chalk it up to experience or whatever. And then he came back to him and was like, I need a little more time. I've been
have you?
Yeah. Not with pills or actually any kind of drug, just more laziness than anything else.
Let's get into the main event, though.
Yeah,
I think you and I both took Kane. I think Matt took Junior. I don't think anyone expected the fight to turn out like it did.
Well, I think that it was Cain Velasquez being Cain Velasquez. I mean, that performance by Cain was kind of the high level that he bred into us expecting against Brock and against, Antonio Silva and against some of the other guys that he's beaten, just being a cardio machine and relentless. So I wasn't surprised by his performance. I was impressed by Dos Santos' ability to withstand it to a degree that I don't think we've ever seen anybody do. And, man, I'm okay with seeing these guys fight 10 more times. I have no problem with them just rematching that fight over and over again and fuck Alistair over him.
Well, and I don't think it's so much... I was not surprised to see Kane perform at that level as much as, I think the narrative going into the fight was that if Kane was going to win, he was going to have to take Dos Santos down, sort of hold him down, be able to steal 3-4 rounds to win a decision. And in reality, it became, can Junior survive taking these shots? I think what ultimately won the fight for Kane was just those first 3 minutes. Where he just put that pace on that Dos Santos just wasn't prepared for whatever reason. Ended up taking towards the end of the round or in the last half of the round, took a couple shots that really put him on woozy street. And he just never really recovered from that. There were times in the last half of the fight where he looked fresher than he did in the first 3 rounds, but never really presented a danger to Velasquez, and never really was in the fight after those first few minutes.
Well, yes, and that's obviously, Cain Velasquez is wonderful for a lot of reasons, and obviously these guys at heavyweight are just going to rub my earlier prediction in my face from here to eternity that nobody under 265 will ever have the heavyweight championship again, because I don't even know if there's anybody 265 in the division anymore. So, the being as little as Cain is, he closed the reach advantage brilliantly. One of the last good people at Bloody Elbow is Jack Slack, who does some of their fighter analysis, and he made the point that all through the first round, Junior is resetting like Cain's going to come and box with him. And while Cain was throwing strikes and he did get clipped a couple of times, he was more just firing the jab out in order to get in closely enough. And while he whiffed on a lot of takedown attempts, and those take energy, hopping backwards as fast as you can and pulling your leg out from a death grip get tiring too. So I definitely think that Dos Santos' cardio is in question. We've seen him get tired in the second and third round of fights and not be able to finish guys that you'd think he'd be able to, like Roy Nelson, like Shane Carwin, like almost Crow Cop, who he had to punch in the eyeball in the third round with his glove in order to finish. It's a question now. And if, Cain may be the only guy that can draw him out into those long waters in the entire goddamn division and do something about it. But while he can and while he's healthy, Cain Velasquez is not the GOAT heavyweight. That's going to be Fedor for a good long while until somebody puts together a nice long winning streak. But if you had to pick, if an alien came from another planet, this is the Fight Linker method of rating fighters, okay? Are you familiar with this?
I am familiar with this, sir.
Yes. Zorgon the Wet. Alien comes from another planet, says, I'm going to fight your best fighter at this weight class, or I'm going to stick pineapple-sized probes into all your asses. Who do you pick to go fight the alien? I pick Cain Velasquez.
And you just hope the alien doesn't have takedown defense.
Even if I don't know if even if he does, Cain can box, and he's got a chin. It's, Junior Dos Santos is a pretty heavy goddamn hitter. We've seen Cain get dropped like 4 times by Chet Congo and just keep coming forward like a zombie.
One thing that was interesting, too, heading into the fight, Junior weighed in right around the same that he usually does, but everyone, either in the audience at the weigh-ins, or just watching on TV, everyone said that he looked more cut. He looked, more muscular.
Looked bigger. Biceps looked bigger. More top heavy.
And I said going into Saturday, I didn't think that was necessarily a good thing for him. The more muscle you have, the more you need to pump oxygen into that muscle to kind of energize it. And one of the things that I thought was that if Cain could get it past the first 2 rounds, he was going to have a huge advantage because obviously he was the more cardio ready fighter, and it's hard to say that played any effect into it. But it also is going to slow you down in terms of your reaction time, your ability to move around the cage, and again, it's hard to say how much that actually had anything to do with how the fight played out. But it was an interesting storyline going into it, though. So the question I have for you right now. And you kind of brought it up with wanting to see these guys rematch. Obviously, we're probably not going to see that rematch right away, even if just to let JDS recover.
He's going to be out for a little bit.
Yeah. And did you see that picture of him afterwards?
Yes, and what he said on Twitter was pretty funny, or it might have been Facebook, it was somewhere. He said, normally my hands hurt after the fight, but this time it is all face.
Yeah. So who do you want to see Cain fight next?
You could make a case for the Overeem Bigfoot loser, except for it's probably going to be Bigfoot, and we've already seen that fucking show. I think him versus Roy Nelson would be a blast, and Roy Nelson called him out by name along with all the other top guys in the division, saying that now that he can throw combos, he can roll with them. So Roy's, can take a beating. He's got decent takedown defense, he's good jiu-jitsu, and he throws bombs. So let's see that fight.
You want to see Roy Nelson and Cain Velasquez?
Can you name a more qualified, I think this guy might win fighter for Cain Velasquez, considering that Dana has already said that if Werdum wins his next fight, he will get the title shot after Overeem?
Yeah, I wanted to give you... Oh, wait. He said it was after Overeem. I thought.
I don't know.
He
didn't put it like that, but Overeem's getting the title shot if he beats Bigfoot. So I assume that they mean if Werdum wins, he'll fight the winner in the summer or whatever.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting as well.
Situation.
I want to look up Verdum's record because I mean, he just lost to Overeem not more than 18 months ago.
Well, yeah, if Overeem's the champion, that might complicate things. But then again, he's 1-1 against Overeem.
Verdum beat Roy Nelson and Mike Russo in 2012, and he's going to fight Rodrigo Nogueira in June.
So if he beats Nog, okay, so that brings me back to my question. At heavyweight, Cain Velasquez and Junior Dos Santos, we consider them so many echelons above, so beyond Roy Nelson, who would you have him fight? I don't think Werdum's a competitive fight for Cain Velasquez.
Let me bring up
the UFC heavyweight goddamn roster.
Yeah, I think Overeem's got to be the next fight, assuming he gets through Bigfoot, and I think it's I think it's fair to say that he's probably going to beat Bigfoot. Obviously Cormier would be a great fight, but we're not going to see it.
Cormier's not going to fight Velasquez,
right?
And this means if Velasquez can defend once or twice, it's all the more likely we'll see Cormier light heavyweight, which is awesome.
Right. But yeah, it looks. I mean, I've got the recent released SBN rankings, not the meta rankings, but the in-house rankings they do, and they have Verdum at 4. Everyone except Tim Burke has him at 4. Tim has him at 3, just ahead of Cormier for some reason. And then you go past that.
All Cormier's really done at heavyweight is beat the shit out of Barnett, who was a paper tiger.
True. Interesting thing. Who do you think number 6 is in their rankings?
Ooh, number 6 heavyweight. So Cain, Junior, Overeem, Cormier, Werdum, probably Nelson.
Overeem, I will let you know, is not on the list.
Weird. Okay, Garlic is suspended.
Suspended. Number 6 is Antonio Minotauro Nogueira.
He beat Schaub. He probably shouldn't be ranked above Frank Mir.
He's not.
Okay, so Frank Mir isn't.
Frank is 5.
Well, okay. Well, Cain Velasquez versus Frank Mir would be hilarious.
Has Frank fought since the Dos Santos fight, though?
I don't think so.
I don't think he has.
Well, no, he was going to fight Cormier, and then he got hurt.
Right.
I think they still want to do that fight, though. I think that Mir Cormier is still the goal. Because obviously they like Frank Mir in hilarious situations against wrestlers that can punch.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a great fight for Cormier, though. It's a great fight to introduce him to the UFC. It's a fight that he should, win handedly.
Guy you can beat the piss out of. What else do you want?
Yeah. So yeah, I think assuming things go smoothly, I think Overeem and then Verdum makes the most sense, and that quote makes more sense now.
Who do you want Cain to fight?
Overeem.
No, but Overeem's okay. Fair enough.
I mean, obviously, the big wrench comes into play though if Bigfoot beats Overeem.
That would be goofy. They won't give Bigfoot the title shot. They'll probably just accelerate Werdum in that case.
Well, and then they got to wait until June for Verdum to fight Nogueira.
Shit, that's all the way in June. God damn. All right. Well, heavyweight, that's okay. So obviously they're just putting the bank on Overeem to win, so they can do that fight in July or August, and then have Cain defend again at the end of the year. The 3 times a year thing would be nice if it happened, but it really doesn't. Like, it's more every 6 months, and some of that is because of lack of contenders at heavyweight, and that shit sucks.
Yeah. On the flip side, though, who do you want to see Dos Santos come back to fight?
That, I'd say Roy Nelson, but we've seen that show. Does he deserve a cupcake? Does he deserve a Czech Congo, a Mark Hunt, somebody he can easily beat the hell out of? Or
well, I think Hunt's fighting your boy Struve, right?
I know, and that makes me so sad because I love them both.
I mean, you could easily put him in against the winner of that fight.
You could, but he's already fought Struve.
It's true.
Which is a brutal debut fight for Struve. That was Struve's UFC debut. That was after Santos. And that was some of the goofiest matchmaking ever. Dos Santos comes in the UFC, knocks out fucking Werdum, and his next fight is the rookie 21-year-old Stefan Struve.
Well, how about if they do end up bringing Barnett in? How about Barnett Dos Santos?
That would be awesome, and I'd be okay with that. But I don't want him to bring in Barnett.
I really think they're going to have to.
Why? He adds nothing to the division other than he can be beaten.
He's a quality heavyweight. There's not a lot of quality heavyweights
that has three positive drug tests, and I don't know how quality he is.
Well, I mean, he's in the top 10 of almost every ranking.
Which is retarded. He was like number 3 in a lot of rankings after beating Brett Rogers and Sergey Kharitonov.
I mean, you admit though on talent, just ranking guys on talent.
Don't admit on talent. Back in 2004, yes, when he was the only heavyweight that knew that knew submissions other than Nog.
So you don't think Josh Barnett beats Roy Nelson?
I don't think Josh Barnett beats Mirko Cro Cop.
Mirko Cro Cop today?
Today, because Mirko Cro Cop's already 3-0 against him, and they've both gotten old at the same pace.
I think Josh Barnett beats Mirko Cro Cop today.
Mirko Cro Cop won his last fight by submission, sir. I don't know what kind of submission.
Did you watch any of that card?
No.
No, neither did I.
I was playing Red Dead Redemption, probably.
Yeah. I think I woke up, I think I maybe caught some of the GIFs on Bloody Oval, but I didn't watch any of the other card.
They're GIFs. Fuck you.
GIFs, like the peanut butter.
Chew the moms.
Speaking of fight of the years that we were talking about earlier, Jim Miller and Joe Lozon. One of those fight of the years that's more noteworthy because of the violence involved and Lozon showing some heart in a.
And the first 3 minutes are just so brutal. Like Jim Miller's hitting him like he fucking spat at his sister or something. The fuck are you? Bam, bam.
Do you put that fight in contention for fight of the year? Is that something you're going to consider, or is it fall short for you just because of the one-sidedness of it?
Well, I think that it will be remembered because of the brutality, so it'll probably be in the nominations at the end of the year when they say fight of the year because it's early and it's the first contender. It was the fight of the night on the first card, da-da-da-da-da, or the last card, da-da-da-da-da. But no, because it was really at no point did I doubt that Jim Miller was going to win that fight, and I need a little bit of that to be a truly compelling, When I think of fight of the year, I'm thinking what fight told the best story, and that story has to involve some intrigue, and the only intrigue was how is Joe Lozon surviving this?
Yeah, and one thing I thought was interesting, I don't remember if it was Rogan or Anik, I think it was Rogan, but one of them said that both guys had success against high-level fighters, and which is funny because I think we talked about it last week, that the story of both guys' careers is that they've sort of fallen short against the high-level guys. Miller and Lozon, Miller's only got 3 losses in the UFC. I think Lozon's got 4 or 5, but they're all against the cream of the crop in the division. That's sort of been their Achilles heel in terms of climbing up the rankings. Miller's lost to, Henderson, Maynard, and someone else. And
Diaz.
Diaz, yeah. And Lozon had...
So, really, really good guy. Miller also had an 8-fight winning streak, which Lozon never has.
Right, I just thought that was funny. The narrative was completely destroyed, I think, from what was actually factually true.
Well, it's like people think that the announcers come up with all this shit themselves. That nobody writes for them and is like, hey, here's some stuff to go off of for this fight. Here's a paragraph or 2 to throw in there when they're walking into the cage. They sit down and write all that shit. So, no, obviously the same guy doing the notes for Goldie is the same guy doing the notes for Anik.
Pretty sure it was Rogan that said it, to be fair.
Well, whoever. But I'm saying that all that stuff is not dependent on the voice that's saying it. It's all prepackaged. And you could have fucking, Studs Terkel in there, and there'd still be some of that shit. It doesn't matter. It's fucking...
Studs Terkel?
I'm just thinking of, the most... Who would you think of, the most eloquent would have, the best story to tell, and you never get tired of listening to talk versus, and Shooter starting Mark Wahlberg. You can't get away from that. It doesn't matter who's in the booth.
If I was going to bring up someone... To do that, I would bring up Vince Scully.
Howard Cosell.
Oh, fuck Howard Cosell.
Oh, now you want to talk shit on Howard Cosell. You are obviously a moron.
In the that's a very bad Howard Cosell. In the quote unquote featured middleweight bout, Costa Philippou
I was wrong about both the middleweight fights. I don't want to talk about those.
Oh, I want to talk about them.
How stupid Alan Belcher is. I don't want to talk about how stupid Alan Belcher is.
Well, we'll get to that one in a second because I want to. I think Boch's problem is obviously he got poked in the eye. He was probably fighting with one hand. Yeah, and this kind of goes back to the main event too. I mean, obviously, I think we can both agree that Boch's corner probably should not have let him fight after the first or second round.
Second.
I mean, at that point he couldn't see out of one eye. He probably broke his hand. Using only one side of his body. But I wanted to, and I posted this on Twitter, and most people seem to come back with, they thought letting him fight was fine. But do you think there's any argument in that third or fourth round that Junior's corner should not have let him come out for the, fourth or fifth round?
No, because Junior has one punch knockout power, and it's not automatic. He's got a number of knockdowns. The OC he doesn't touch you, and you go to sleep. But when you have that, you know that especially at heavyweight, you know that the fight can turn in an instant. And fighter wants to fight. Velasquez is more about an accumulation of shots. He hit Junior with his best and didn't put him out in the first round. No, I don't see that argument. I don't give them any shit for that. I don't think there's any permanent damage.
I mean, I think it's hard to argue there's no permanent damage when a guy takes 100 shots to the face.
Well,
there's always going to be some sort of permanent damage from that.
Well, okay, fine, and that adds in. Then this goes back to the entire argument about trauma in the head and repetitive concussions. Is that do you think that everybody has a magic ticker above their head about how many punches they can take before this happens at a certain age or that happens at a certain age? And is it different for everyone? Is it the kind of punch? There's so much to go off of there, and it's you don't hire a corner man and say, hey, as soon as you think this is a lost cause, throw in the towel. That's not their job. If I'm down 3 rounds to nothing and you don't think I can do it in the next 2, then let's just call it a day so I don't take any permanent damage. That can't be your mentality as a fighter. It can't be your mentality as a football player. Like, you know what, coach? We're down by 21 points as a fourth quarter. I'm just not going to play anymore.
Well, I think my argument, though, is that after the third round, he's down 3 rounds for sure. And in my opinion, he lost those first 2 rounds 10-8. So, even if he comes back, turns the tide, wins the next 2 rounds 10-8 himself, he's not even in line for a draw. And those first 3 rounds after that big flurry landed in the first, for the most part, he was, to me, it never looked like he had fully recovered. He was sort of never really recovered his legs under him. In the fourth, I thought he actually looked better. But I think there's at least an argument to be made that his corner could have stopped it after the third.
Well, I think there's an argument that Shogun's corner could have stopped it after the third against Henderson and just said, look, unless you finish this guy in the next 10 minutes, you're going to lose this decision, and it's pointless for us to keep fighting. Shogun keeps fighting, he eats a few more shots, but he wins the shit out of the next 2 rounds, still loses the decision. But, his corner doesn't take any shit for it, and I don't understand the line between those 2 performances because, if anything, Shogun got beat up worse than Dos Santos did in 3 rounds and Junior did in 5.
And there is an argument that Shogun's corner could have stopped in that fight.
So that's what I'm saying, but nobody made it. Nobody was like, that fight shouldn't have gone on. People were saying, holy shit, what a magical fucking night. Look at them hugging afterwards, arms around each other, all bloodied up. You want that. And nobody's thinking about CTE down the line.
Yeah. But in that other middleweight fight, I tweeted during the fight that I was sorry, Yushin Okami, for doubting you.
Yushin Okami did exactly what everybody thought he was going to do. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. Belcher knew what he was going to do, and Belcher said, hey, top control god, let me hop on my back for you every fucking round.
Well, and the other thing about it, too, when Belcher stepped in the cage, he did not look good. He looked a lot bigger and flabbier than usual. I don't know if you've picked up on that.
No, he did. He looked a little bit different in the body, but that had nothing. It was his game plan that was the problem because it was. I mean, in the second round, especially.
Well, I knew
it's body lock on him. Beautiful trip takedown. Belcher sprawls on it beautifully, lands in half guard, no problem. Then deliberately sits up and goes pretty much vertical, ass under his shoulders, so that Okami can swim in order to shoot for the takedown and get the switch to improve his position, and then jumps on the guillotine and spends the next 4 minutes on his back getting beaten up.
I actually thought I had a bet on Belcher around even coming into the fight. The moment that I knew I was sort of fucked was towards the end of the first round. Okami had him. I don't know if it was in half. Was on top in half guard or what, but he had head control on Belcher, and it was right up against the cage, and you could just hear very clearly in the mic just Belcher breathing like, and
Belcher wobbled him at the beginning of the second with a strike. He did the same thing at some point in the third. I mean, he was hit. He was bombing them when they were on the feet. His game plan was not to keep it on the feet. It was to hit that stupid goddamn guillotine.
Yeah,
it was Campman-esque.
And you never want your game plan to be Catman-esque.
No, you don't. That is a lack of a game plan. And obviously, he had a plan. Obviously, that was the goal, which was to sprawl in that takedown, get him to stick his head in, snatch it, and finish him that way. And once it fails twice, going for it again, especially when you need a finish in the third, it was just, God damn it! I was very, very, very disappointed in Alan Belcher after that fight, and I don't think I'm going to let him tease me again. I think I'm done.
Yeah, I'm always going to like Alan Belcher.
Me too.
I always think he's a good guy to watch fight, but
beat the hell out of Paul Harris.
Yeah. A couple fights in the prelims that I wanted to kind of go over quick. Eddie Wineland, I thought, looked absolutely fantastic against Brad Pickett.
Brad Pickett, and Brad Pickett was an excellent foil for that because he comes straight forward, uncork the right, willing to get hit in order to hit, durable. Wineland looked a little bit better in the first 2 minutes than he did for the rest of the fight. I don't know if he slowed down or anything or if Pickett kind of figured it out, but those first 2 minutes set a bar for me that he didn't meet for the rest of it. But at the same time, I kind of left him for dead after he lost to Faber, and now I'm interested to see what he can keep doing.
Yeah. The other fight on the FX card that I wanted to get to touch on, Melvin Guillard pulling a Melvin Guillard against Jamie Varner.
Melvin Guillard to end all Melvin Guillards. The fucking face that sunk 1,000 parlays, Melvin Guillard.
Yeah, I think what kind of summed up the fight to me was towards the end of the third round, or probably the last couple minutes. They were back on their feet. Basically, Melvin had been just struggling to stay on his feet, and they got back to the feet, and I just expected him to throw a lazy punch and Varner just to duck under it and perfectly time a takedown, and that's exactly what happened. And that sort of sealed the fight for him. There was some bit of action towards the end in the third round there as the bell rang, but just typical Melvin Guillard.
Yes, and despite that being I think it was his 65th pro fight.
Yeah,
and he's insane. A little bit older than we are.
Yeah,
he's like a little bit, and he still hasn't learned.
Yeah,
he doesn't win grudge matches. Apparently, that's just been the story.
And then a fight on the Facebook portion of it that you and I had a bit of a Twitter disagreement about. Leonard Garcia losing a split decision to Max Holloway.
Bullshit.
You thought it was bullshit. You thought
Steph Daniels thought it was bullshit. 7 out of the 9 media organizations polled by MMADecisions.com thought it was bullshit.
I am pulling up the fight metric stats as we speak.
They pull up MMADecisions.com too. See, all your boys. Chris Nelson, our favorite on Twitter, he scored it for Leonard.
Fight metric has Holloway ahead in every round by significant strikes and by total strikes.
What does it have on the decision?
Well, it's not the in-depth report, so it doesn't give you the effectiveness score.
But it's got grappling though, right?
It has Holloway. It gives Holloway a knockdown in the first round, and
in the first round,
and there were 2 takedowns for Garcia, one in the second and one in the third, and they credited him with a pass in the third. Typical Garcia, they had him landing 89 of 359 strikes for that's significant strikes, 25%. Total strikes 92 of 367. They don't have a number for percentage of that. What I saw watching live
he was the aggressor. He controlled the ring.
You're giving me the
had Holloway on his heels.
You're giving me the MMA judge explanation for every Leonard Garcia fight that they score for him. He was coming forward. He was the aggressor. He had Holloway going backwards. But if you look at the numbers, Holloway struck him in every round.
This is bullshit. I could find 10 of those that aren't in-depth reports that have the sheer numbers on one guy's side. I bet Diego Sanchez had better numbers than Martin Kamen. You think he won that fucking fight?
I can find out for you, actually.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like,
I will do that just for you.
The raw numbers are very easy to do. That may or may not be a bad example. But the point is that just because Leonard Garcia has been gifted decisions in the past does not mean that he should be held accountable here. And what it does when we do that is it excuses bad judging. That was a poorly judged fight. Leonard Garcia's fights in the past have been judged poorly when he won. This one was judged poorly when he lost. He should have won that fight.
Fight Metric has Kampman for the total fight having landed more significant strikes and more total strikes.
But how about per round?
Per round, 32-10 significant strikes in the first, 26-22 in the second, and they were even in the third.
Ooh, that argues almost for a Sanchez comeback decision.
And they have Kampman winning 29-28, scoring the third round, obviously, for Diego. I said live that I thought Holloway won. I stand by that after looking at the stats. Maybe I'll give it a rewatch, but probably not. But I would probably still give it to Holloway.
You can find the Facebook fights. Now, everything's out there now. You can get the prelims, Facebook fights, and the main card. It's very nice.
It's more a matter of if I want to watch a Leonard Garcia fight voluntarily for a second time.
That was not a bad fight. He didn't look like shit.
He looked exactly like Leonard Garcia always looks.
Is he a top 20 guy, in your opinion?
No.
Is he top 25?
No.
Is he top 30?
He might be in the top 50.
The top 50, you can name 30 featherweights better than Leonard Garcia right now.
Right now, no. But if I look through the roster, I could probably pick out 30 featherweights.
I don't think you can find a ranking that doesn't have him in the top 25.
Let's check out what Fight Matrix says.
Oh, this is the
I just want to see
the internet hour. This is why we're so popular and everybody loves us.
I want to see what...
I want to see, bro.
I want to see Garcia. Not on the first page, which is top 50.
What?
Yep.
Where is this? Fight Matrix?
Yep.
Fight Matrix is fucking weird.
It is a little weird.
It's very weird.
I mean,
it's going to have like Travis Fulton as the best fighter of all time.
They have him... Wow. Whoa.
Yeah, like 6th?
They have him at number... give me an over-under, what you think it is.
For Leonard Garcia?
Yeah.
Dude, it should be like 22.
Nope.
What?
138.
Okay, name the 3 guys above him. Just give me their names.
All right, the guy right above him is Olivier Pastor. Whose last fight was in Vision Fighting Championships against Joni Salavara. The guy above him, Alan Omir, a German fighter, fought in a real cage fight against Jojiro Boya. And then number 135, last fighting in the score fighting series against Brad Cardinal, Mr. Chris Horodecki.
Yeah! Fucking Leonard Garcia worse than Chris Horodecki. Thank you, Fight Matrix, for putting someone with a name within that little list that I had Mike read off. That's fucking absurd.
Well, he's lost 4 in a row. His last one was over Nam Fan. I mean, you look at his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 fights. He only has 3 wins and a draw.
You're a dumb person.
And if you really want to get technical about it, he probably won maybe one of those fights.
Mike,
you got to win
138, the 138th. Do you think that the 3 guys ranked above him would beat him in a fight?
No, I don't think they would.
Well, then what the fuck?
But that's what happens when you. I mean, when you get into like objective.
That's what happens when you're in the UFC and you fight good fighters every time. You lose a lot more than you do if you're at the score fighting championship.
It's interesting looking at some of the names here, going up and down the list. Cameron Dollar, Anthony Morrison, Nazareno. I mean, and the thing too, and when we get to this section of it, I mean, they gave Garcia, 43 points. And all those guys that were ranked above him are at 43, and there's another guy below him. Mr. Rolly Delgado of former UFC fame, also at 43. I mean, when you get into the objective rankings like this, you're going to get weird stuff that happen. So I don't think Leonard's the number 138th featherweight on the planet, but I don't think he's. It's not surprising to me that you would find him outside the top 50 either.
This is really silly to me. You know what else is really silly is the one UFC card that's happening between now and Fox 6. We were trying to determine the next one, the Brazil card, Belfort versus Bisping. Daniel Sarafian, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, Sarafian, Sarafian, making his UFC debut in the co-main event against CB Dalloway.
And how do you feel about that, Derek?
I think it's weird, but it's a Brazil card, so whatever.
Yeah,
what they do in Brazil, I'm completely fine with, and I don't give a shit because it's a huge market and they love us forever. So fuck it, do what they want.
Well, it's interesting too because it's not as if he has like a long record of destruction. He's 7-2.
He's won 4 straight, and his last 2 fights ended in the first round.
He lost at the first Bellator show to Gary Padilla, who doesn't have a Wikipedia page.
This was 3 years ago. Yes, we're probably looking at the same shit right now, you bastard.
And also lost to Mike Whitehead at Platinum Fighting Productions.
Mike Whitehead is a very giant man, though. So that's weird that he was fighting him.
Yeah.
Especially now that he's a middleweight.
Yeah. Mike Whitehead also a big douchebag. It's interesting that they don't have Gonzaga Rothwell in that co-main.
I loved it when Bellator announced they were going to be doing that special, like they're going to be doing like a 1-hour special on King Mo before he ever does anything for him. And I tweeted, what was it? It was, come with us on a journey with a guy that knocked out Mike Whitehead once.
We're running up on the hour, so I want to get to the other couple of things that I have here. The big non-UFC story, and speaking of Bellator, they apparently matched Eddie Alvarez. There's some confusion. There was an exclusive matching period where the UFC made an offer to Alvarez. Bellator had the right to match. They did. Now there's some confusion. No one seems to know if that means that Alvarez is sort of stuck with Bellator, if that means that the UFC can come back with another contract offer, if Alvarez has the choice of which offer he wants to take, because assuming that he gets pay-per-view points in the UFC offer, I don't think Bellator can offer that to him, in good faith anyway. I've seen some, Adam Martin has been talking about how Bellator needs to re-sign Alvarez no matter what. I think that's a little, that's just a naive thing to say without knowing the money involved, what sort of money Bellator is running with. I personally think Bellator probably shouldn't re-sign Alvarez. I think he means more to the UFC right now. And Alvarez also is a guy, if he loses another fight in Bellator, whatever marketability he has is almost kaput.
He lost a lot of it already, which is why, if he had beaten Chandler and he was a free agent now, the UFC's offer would be beyond Bellator's capabilities. But he's lesser now because he's not even their champion currently. Michael Chandler is. And what Bellator is doing right now is a classic small promotion mistake. I completely agree with you that they should let Eddie go, that their best role is to let their fighters graduate, then see if they can succeed in the UFC. And then if they do, that generates interest for people who want to watch Bellator to see them before they get up there. Gamblers will be interested in that. Casual fans will be more interested in it because you can say a champion came from there. But the bottom line here is that Bellator will be wasting a lot of money at what is essentially just an Alvarez-Chandler rematch, a fight that nobody's going to watch, and if Chandler wins it again, then it's basically like they lit the money on fire from the Huerta signing all over again.
Right. One thing I've been thinking about, and I tried to write a column about it for my blog, but I never got around to it. One thing you're seeing in baseball with small market teams is signing superstars or potential superstars, I should say, to long-term deals where they get a bit of a discount because they're guaranteeing 7, 8, 9, 10 years. I wonder if that's something that Bellator could consider. If they could consider signing a guy. When they first picked up Eddie, he was 2009, 3 years ago. He was about 25. Already had kind of established himself as a guy that could compete at the top level. And they did get 3 years out of him, assuming they lose him now. They did get 3 years out of him, but if they could sign him for 6 years and sort of instead of guaranteeing fights, maybe guaranteeing money per year, instead of getting into this situation. Because now, really, if the UFC, like we saw with Lombard, they can just price Bellator out if they want to.
Yes, but I don't know. Bellator's kind of a scattershot organization. I don't know why they would value Alvarez more than Lombard, considering the fact that Lombard hadn't lost his fucking title right before the end of it. So that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, why would you let one go and then keep the other if you have the fiscal means? There's
also there's a couple arguments there. Eddie's younger. I think Lombard's, 33, 34, 30. He might be 35. And also, Alvarez is a white guy. Not that matters so much to fight fans like you and I, but Eddie's a marketable guy. He's a handsome white dude with, a pretty exciting fight style. And obviously their situation's different now than it was when Lombard left.
Well, it's very exciting when Eddie Alvarez gets punched in the head, which happens in like every fight that he's in.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Dana White said that the negotiations are about to get ugly. I don't know if there's something in the contract that they are going to try to, in his current contract with the matching rights, that they're going to try to go after legally. But yeah, I'm actually very surprised that Bellator matched the deal.
It's stupid if they did. It's stupid if they incurred the UFC's wrath, because the only way to do it is to compete with them for free agents. They didn't give a shit about Strikeforce until they did it with Fedor. And this is, it'll be the beginning of the end for them if they pull it off.
One other thing about Bellator, did you see that they did a bit of a brand update? Did you see?
No. I know you were bitching about it. I don't know why they would change their logo. God forbid people remember you.
Well, they not only changed the logo, and they changed it to a really generic-looking logo, but they changed the name from Bellator Fighting Championships to Bellator MMA. Now, to me, if you're going to make any change to the name, you just cut off the surname and just call it Bellator. I don't understand the change from Bellator Fighting Championships to Bellator MMA, which sounds ridiculous.
Well, I'm sure somebody just gave Bjorn like a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation of brand identification and saturation and key demographics and fucking wowed him, and they said, okay, let's do this.
A couple more bits before we get out of here. Dan Severn retired.
Godspeed.
The one memory I have of Dan Severn as a fighter, and this is sort of unfair to him, but when I first started watching MMA, my buddy and I, rented a bunch of tapes at the local video store, and the one Dan Severn fight I remember is, I don't remember if it's the first fight with Shamrock or the rematch with Shamrock, where it's just a half hour of nothing.
I think it's the rematch.
It's the rematch. It's a half hour or 25 minutes of nothing, and then they finally get at it. Severn wins a split decision. Probably one of the worst fights I've ever watched.
He's been in some stinkers, but he also German suplexed the shit out of that guy in either his UFC debut or his second fight. And, he did not start any kind of professional MMA until he was, I think, 36, maybe even older. So, I mean, and that's, kind of like a Randy-ish thing to do. And, hell of a guy. And one of the old UFC games, the fucking Undisputed 2 or whatever it was, back in 2002, he was a beast.
He is the beast.
Yes, and he had that wonderful WWF career there for a little bit. They would not let him participate in the Brawl for All because they knew he would win. He did one round and sat on the Godfather and was like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yes, during his, I actually just stumbled upon it. During his 1 year tenure, he competed in the Brawl for All tournament, beating the Godfather in the first round. However, he withdrew prior to the quarterfinals, allowing the Godfather to advance by default.
Yeah, and then the Godfather lost again.
Yeah.
And that was the death of Dr. Death. They created that tournament to sell Dr. Death, and he got knocked out by Bart Gunn.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of Steve Williams, too. I've been watching All Japan stuff, and he had a good run in All Japan. But the last bit before we get out of here, the last 6 or 8 months, there have been a lot of issues with UFC pages on Wikipedia. There's a new page now, MMAwiki.com, which is... It's still a little bare bones, but
It's
they
pretty
are.
good. It's got most of it already.
Well, it doesn't have all of the Pride cards or the Strikeforce shows or Elite XC shows, but it does have all the UFC events like Wikipedia used to. Now, Derek, you and I talked about it before the show. You would prefer to see resources go to combating the douchiness on Wikipedia. I don't mind them. I don't mind an alternative popping up.
I see it as a bad road, especially if Wikipedia goes down it long term and big time. But in this specific avenue, it's bullshit because there's a Wikipedia page for the 1985 Denver Broncos season, 1986 Denver Broncos season, all kinds of different things for every team sport. And if you're going to say, well, these MMA events, they're one-offs and they're related to the sport as a whole, but they don't deserve their own page, then why isn't there, NFLwiki.com? Why isn't there MLBwiki.com? If those sports are good enough to be in Wikipedia, then ours is too. My main concern is that by having this resource, as awesome as it is, and I have it up right now because Mike brought it to my attention, and it's good, but because it's there, when there are these debates on the Wikipedia threads and people are saying we want to keep it here, there's no reason to remove it, the moderators who are being dicks can say, look, they already fucking made one. Just go over there if you want MMA shit and delete the page. It's an easy excuse for them to continue doing what they're doing instead of actually addressing the issue and giving the sport its proper place in that encyclopedia.
Yeah. And it seems like the issue is just that there's a handful of people that for whatever reason don't care for MMA and just want to use any excuse to rid the site.
I don't care for Fabergé eggs, but I'm not trying to get the fucking pages deleted off of Wikipedia because I think they're a waste of money.
Well, and the funny thing too is if you go through Wikipedia, you can find Wikipedia pages for NBA players that were up for 6 months in the NBA and mostly were, bench warmers for their entire career. And if you're going to make the argument that a UFC event doesn't deserve its own page and then allow or not raise a stink about guys like that getting their own Wikipedias, I think...
Like every NFL draft has its own page. Every game, every stadium that's ever hosted an NFL game is going to have its own page. The stadium that they're holding the UFC show, Belfort versus Bisping on, has its own Wikipedia page, capacity of 1,000 or 11,000, record attendance over 20,000. The Ginásio do Ibirapuera.
Not a bad pronunciation.
Hey, I have my moments.
That's the show this week. Eric, if you want to start hitting the music here, hopefully we'll get Matt Roth back next week. We can put together a proper year-end show.
He's not busy, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Hopefully he's listening. If he is, we hope to talk to you next week, Matt. Derek, any final words before we get out of here?
Yeah, hope to have Matt back, starting the new year off right with us, guys. One day I'll write again, but I tell you what, nobody wants me to anymore, so probably not.
Yeah. All right, we'll see you guys all next week.